Alright, on the workbench I've got a Tupperware container and a little sour cream container. Then on the ground I've got an identical container, Rubbermaid or whatever, and a piece of PVC pipe and the lid to one of those. And these are salvaged. I've used them quite a bit. They're starting to get cracked up, one worse than the other. But what we're going to do today is we're going to make a self-watering container garden, a lot like some of the commercial products that you can buy out there, but significantly cheaper, especially since all the stuff is scrap. So anyway, let's get to it and I'll show you what we're going to do. Alright, first thing we have to do is we have to make our little water reservoir, and it'd help if I had a bigger container, but that's what I've got. And this is one of our Rubbermaid, is the one that's the most broke. It's broke a lot up at the top, and so what we're going to do is we're going to cut it, use the bottom, invert it, and then that'll make a water reservoir inside the other one. Now this isn't going to work as good as some other designs because my container walls, they're not really flat, and so it's going to have probably a hard time fitting it down in there. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of massaging. If you go buy these, or if you have a choice, it's always better to use a wider box than a taller box, and to get a box with straight sides, especially down at the bottom. Okay, and so all we're going to do is we're just going to mark it at the depth of this container, and then I'm going to draw a line all the way around. I'm going to cut it. So I'm going to cut it. We're going to come back. I'll show you the next step. Ended up cutting a little piece out of each corner so that it'll sit down in the container. Otherwise it was cattywampus. So now I can force it to lay flat down in there. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to cut a place in the center for this, okay, and then when you fill the container up with dirt, the dirt will sit here, but the water will sit down here. That cup will be in the center, and it'll fill with dirt, and it'll wick water up into the roots. So I have to do two things. Number one, I have to cut a hole in the center, slightly smaller. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to draw a circle around here. Okay. But when I cut it, I'm going to cut it. Geez, that would have been brilliant to begin with, wouldn't it? Okay. So I'm going to cut out the center one. That'll fit, and I'm also going to cut little slots in here because I'm too cheap to buy a commercial one. So we'll do that and we'll come back and I'll show you the next step. Alright, there's my circle, and here's my cup. And I probably cut those slots probably too big. The commercial ones, they're smaller, but there's a lot more of them. But with my Dremel tool, I kind of just have to go with what I can do. So that's going to sit just like that. Okay. But I'm also going to need some drain holes, so I'm going to poke a bunch of drain holes in here. And then in the corner, I'm going to cut a spot for my pipe, just like that. Okay? So we'll do that, we'll come back. Okay, so you see all my little nice little pretty holes. The other thing that I did is I cut my PVC pipe to just over the top of the container. And I cut, you know, basically a little 45-degree angle. I'm just using a Dremel tool today, so all my stuff's kind of jacked up and ugly. But I cut it in an angle so that when the water comes down, it can flow out. If I cut it straight, it would just, you know, it wouldn't want to flow very good. So now we're just going to put a drain hole just above, just above the reservoir, because otherwise it could fill up and do what happened with my loofah sponges and fill it up with water and end up killing everything. So this way, when the water gets above the level it's supposed to be, it'll just drain completely out of the container. Okay? And since the season's about over for growing, I'm going to use this for tomatoes inside, some indeterminate season tomatoes, so they'll grow year round. And so eventually what I'll do is I'll just put a a drain right there so that I could drain it off into something so I don't drain all over my house. But for now, I'm just going to have to be careful not to overwater. Okay, so to assemble, we just put the cup in the middle. Push that down. Let it sit on there nice and pretty. Put my water in there, and I think what I'm going to do is cut a little hole and zip tie that down just like that. And then all I have to do now is make a lid. So let me make a lid. Alright, so that's it. All I did was cut out 6 little planter holes and a spot for my water filler. Okay, and there's a couple different ways of doing this. Probably the best way, from my opinion, is the guy that I linked to. He ended up cutting all of this out and then using mulch, and that way it's a little more flexible. By cutting the holes, if I use established plants, which what I'm probably going to do is I'm just going to go to the nursery and buy some tomato plants, and they're deeply discounted right now. If I put established plants through these holes, I can kind of beat them up if they're larger and they have to go in upside down. But I cut them out that way, and I cut them that size on purpose because I'm also thinking about experimenting with aeroponics, and by doing it this way, I'm halfway there to an aeroponic system, at least with my outside container. And so if I get tired of this, bored of this, and I want to try something else, I don't have to get a different container. I can just reuse this one in the lid. So anyway, that's all there is to it. All I'm going to do now is put some soil in there and then put some plants in there and set it out and see what happens. And because I put this little drain hole down here, if it gets too rainy, whatever, it'll just flow right out. So until next time, you can always catch us online at www.tngun.com. Thanks.
I've got a plan, fits my point of view. I'm giving